The shit is wicked on these mean streets, mean streets.
Dear God, I wonder, can you save me?
He came into the world carrying a story that was already moving before he ever took a breath. Eugene Big U Henley Jr. was born in South Los Angeles, raised in the Hyde Park section during a time when the city was tense, loud, and unforgiving. The 1960s weren't soft years, especially not in South Central. Survival was a daily lesson, and history lived inside the households. His parents were cut from that long road known as the Great Migration, black folks leaving the Deep South with nothing but hope, trying to outrun Jim Crow and find something better up north. Mississippi was where it started. Chicago was the stop where reality hit. That city shaped a lot of people, and not always in gentle ways. In Chicago, Big U's father allegedly brushed shoulders with the streets early on, connecting with figures who would later become legendary, men who blurred the line between gang leadership and revolutionary influence. One of those names would go down in history as a co-founder of the almighty Black Peas Stone Nation. Whether spoken out loud or whispered, that kind of influence lingered, planting seeds that didn't just disappear with time or distance. But Chicago didn't hold the family together. Pressure cracked things apart. His parents went separate ways, and before Eugene was even born, his mother packed up and headed west. Los Angeles was calling, not with promises, but with possibilities. By 1966, she landed in South Central, settling near 81st and Hoover, a stretch of concrete that would shape the rest of the story. That neighborhood wasn't just streets and houses. It was energy, struggle, and identity all rolled into one. It was where generational history met raw reality. From Mississippi to Chicago to South Central LA, the journey wasn't clean, and it wasn't accidental. Big U was born into a lineage marked by movement, survival, and the constant pull of the streets, a foundation laid long before his name ever rang out. According to Big U, South Central was where everything really kicked off. This was the ground where he first started flying the Crip flag, at a time when the movement itself was still young and growing teeth. The Crips had been born just a few years earlier, late 60s South Central, and by the time Big U was old enough to understand what was happening around him, the streets were already choosing sides. Names like Raymond Washington and Craig Craddock rang heavy, and the influence pushed west through figures like Tookie Williams, spreading the identity block by block. Big U wasn't alone in it. His bloodline ran deep in Los Angeles. A large portion of his family relocated to the city, eventually clustering around Slauson and Arlington. That stretch would later be stamped in history as Rolling 60s territory. But back then, the map wasn't fully drawn yet. Before the set became what the world knows now, it was still broken down into earlier factions. Neighborhood Crips and West Side Crips, finding their footing and defining their borders in real time. That neighborhood carried weight long before outsiders knew its name. Years later, it would become iconic for more than street history, doubling as one of the main backdrops for Boys in the Hood. But while Hollywood would eventually tell its version, the real stories were already being lived out on those same corners. Big U's first real step into that life didn't start big. It started local, tight-knit. He ran with a small clique from right there in the area, known as the AG, Arlington Gang, led by his cousin, Chili Capone. It was family-based, neighborhood-rooted, and serious enough to matter. Over time, that crew didn't stay separate. They were absorbed into something larger, becoming part of the Rolling 60s as the set grew in size and reputation, eventually earning a name that echoed across Los Angeles. Trouble found Big U early, like it did most kids coming up in that era. The 1970s weren't forgiving, and he admits he was already deep in the mix while still young. Running with a car robbing crew, moving fast, making reckless choices. It all caught up with him. The system stepped in, sending him to juvenile detention. At one point, things got hot enough that he went on the run, leaving Los Angeles behind and ending up back in Chicago, living with his father once again. By then, the pattern was already set. Between cities, between families, between the streets and the law. Big U's life was moving fast, shaped by places that didn't let you stay neutral for long. Years later, the streets shifted in a way nobody could ignore. By 1979, alliances that once held weight cracked wide open, and what followed would become one of the longest and bloodiest feuds Los Angeles had ever seen. The Rollin' 60s were now at war with the 8-tray gangster Crips, former allies turned sworn enemies. What had once been unity under blue became lines drawn in concrete, and crossing them came with consequences. Not long after, tragedy hit home. In the early 80s, Chili Capone, Big U's cousin and the driving force behind the old Arlington gang, was killed. That loss changed everything. The reckless kid from before was gone. In his place stood a colder, more deliberate version of Big U. He came back to Los Angeles carrying grief and purpose, and by his own words, this was the moment the rules changed. Fists were no longer enough. He said this was when he moved from hands to heat, believing that a gun was the fastest way to power, respect, and survival in a city that didn't forgive weakness. Even without a weapon, Big U was hard to miss. Standing 6 feet 2 inches, built solid, he had a presence that spoke before he ever did. Fighting was still his strength, and back then, that's how disputes were often handled. Straight up, face to face. One of the most notorious places for these confrontations wasn't even in their neighborhood. World on Wheels skate rink became neutral ground that wasn't neutral at all. Crews from all over the city pulled up, not to skate, but to be seen, to test each other, to prove something. One night in particular cemented the Rollin' 60s reputation far beyond South Central. In August of 1986, during a Run DMC concert in the Long Beach area, things exploded. According to Big U, the 60s didn't come for the music. They came to make a statement. What followed was chaos. A massive fight broke out, spilling through the venue, leaving dozens injured and sending shockwaves across LA County. The aftermath was just as loud as the brawl itself. Fear of retaliation and escalating tensions pushed the LA Palladium to cancel Run DMC's next scheduled show. By then, the message was clear. The Rollin' 60s weren't just a neighborhood force anymore. Their name alone could shut down stages, stop events, and command attention citywide. By the mid-80s, Big U wasn't just living in the middle of history. He was helping shape it. Moving through a Los Angeles where reputation traveled faster than sirens, and survival meant adapting to whatever the streets demanded next. By the time the 80s settled in, the county jail had become almost routine for Big U. In and out of the system, catching cases that carried serious weight. Paperwork from those years painted a heavy picture. Charges that stretched all the way to first-degree murder and even an alleged attempt on a peace officer. But in that era, for one reason or another, none of it ever seemed to lock in. The doors kept opening back up. What jail did give him was something else entirely. A platform. Behind those walls, his name grew. Word traveled fast about how he carried himself, how he fought, how he led. He wasn't just another face doing time. He had presence. People listened when he spoke. Fighters respected him, and younger dudes watched closely. Every bid only added layers to the reputation. Law enforcement took notice too. According to federal accounts, it was during the 80s that Big U rose into a serious position within the Rollin' 60s. He wasn't just active, he was influential. His name became tied to enforcement, to violence, to someone willing to go all the way if that's what the situation called for. One report even claimed he became the lead man for the set, surviving being shot multiple times in the process. Whether scarred or not, he was still standing, and that only added to the legend. All of this was unfolding while the city itself was changing. By the late 80s, crack was everywhere. The epidemic hit hard and fast, reshaping neighborhoods and priorities. The rolling 60s were no exception. The streets weren't just about turf anymore. Money was moving, and Big U was right in the middle of it. The operation stretched beyond Los Angeles, with product being pushed into cities like Minneapolis, Atlanta, and Chicago. Out of state, the same skills that kept him afloat back home came into play. He organized, set things up, took over corners, and helped expand influence under the Rolling 60s name. Other crews banged under that banner, and his reach kept growing. It wasn't just muscle, it was structure. Around this same time, another door cracked open, one nobody would have predicted. The music world brushed up against the streets when a rapper known as Papa LQ approached Big U with an offer. He wanted him as a manager. Big U didn't come with industry experience, no contracts or connections like that. But what he did have was respect, authority, and an understanding of how to move people. In a business built on image and credibility, that mattered. So while the street stayed active and the pressure never eased, Big U found himself stepping into something new. Still rooted in the same environment, but now touching a different lane. One foot in chaos, the other testing unfamiliar ground. The 80s weren't slowing down, and neither was he. Around that same time, the music lane kept creeping closer. Another homie tapped Big U's shoulder and asked him to help guide a young, hungry, rolling 60s rapper who was starting to buzz. A kid named Corrupt. By then, Big U wasn't just living fast anymore. He had a family, real responsibilities, and that familiar feeling of being caught in between. One foot still planted in the hustle, the other testing the idea of something different. But the streets don't always let go when you're ready to change. The pressure was already on him. Law enforcement had him in their sights, and by the end of 1991, everything collapsed at once. In December, Big U was caught up in a sting, a setup involving what he believed was a major cocaine score. The plan was to jack the product, but the plug wasn't real. When Big U allegedly pulled a gun and tried to take the load, officers who had been waiting nearby flooded in and shut it all down. This time, there was no slipping through the cracks. The sentence hit like a hammer. 23 years. Headlines didn't hold back, calling him a leader, if not the leader, of the rolling 60s. While hip-hop was entering its golden era on the outside, Big U was being marched behind the walls, watching the world move on without him. Prison didn't soften him. If anything, it sharpened what was already there. He stayed active, stayed respected, continuing to build his name as both a fighter and a shot caller. Stories traveled from cell to cell, some sounding unreal, like the one about a prison fight where someone supposedly lost an eyeball. True or not, the myth grew. Photos of Big U behind bars circulated over the years, freezing his image in time while his reputation kept moving. In later interviews, Big U would openly say that even locked up, he was still running plays, controlling drug movement in the yard, staying influential in an environment where power is everything. But it wasn't all violence and hustle. Not entirely. During that long stretch inside, he crossed paths with people who shifted his thinking. One of them was Michael Harry O. Harris, a heavyweight figure with deep ties to Los Angeles power circles and the early foundations of Death Row Records. Those conversations planted something new. Big U started reading, writing, studying, digging into theology and broader ideas he'd never had time to sit with before. Growth didn't come easy, but it came. Outside the walls, life kept moving, and so did the losses. Corrupt kept Big U's name ringing through his music, shouting him out on tracks, making sure he wasn't forgotten. But the streets kept collecting their dues. One of the hardest hits came when Big U's brother, Dwayne Dry, who worked security for Corrupt and Daz Dillinger, was killed after gunfire erupted outside a recording studio. Locked down, unable to move, Big U could only absorb the loss from a distance. Another name added to the list. Another reminder of what the streets give and what they always take back. After all those years behind the wall, Big U didn't end up doing the full stretch they gave him. He touched daylight again in 2004, 37 years old, stepping back into Los Angeles at a moment when the rolling 60s were being labeled as the biggest black street force in the city. The timing was heavy. The streets were still hot. The names still rang. But Big U wasn't the same man who went in. He carried pieces of what he picked up inside with him. The reading, the thinking, the conversations that stretched past survival. Instead of diving straight back into chaos, he made a sharp turn and rebranded himself as a community figure. He launched a nonprofit called Developing Options, saying the goal was simple: give kids the guidance he never had. The program grew fast, touching thousands of lives, linking up with countless agencies, and claiming major reductions in local gang violence. Big names stood behind it too, including one of the most recognizable figures to ever come out of Long Beach, Snoop Dogg. But the streets were never far away, and neither was the music. Once free, Big U slid right back into the industry lane through familiar faces. Corrupt connected him with Suge Knight, the man who once ruled West Coast rap through fear, power, and intimidation. Suge helped Big U get back on his feet financially and pulled him close, schooling him in how the music business really worked. Together, they formed a presence that shook rooms. Whether people respected them or feared them didn't really matter. Either way, doors opened. Big U adopted that same hard-nosed approach. For some artists around him, the results were explosive success. For others, things spiraled fast and ended ugly. And that path eventually led straight into the complicated, tragic chapter involving Nipsey Hussle. Big U learned how to play ruthless chess in the industry under Suge's watch, a man rumored to have used violence, threats, and extortion to stay on top. Stories about death row had already become legend by then, but as Suge's empire started to crumble under legal pressure and enemies closing in, Big U was already thinking independently. While still incarcerated years earlier, he and his right-hand man, Mark Bear Claw Martin, had quietly laid groundwork for their own label, Unique Music, founded in 1996. Once home, Big U used that platform to hunt talent, leaning on deep street ties that stretched across LA. That's when family plugged him in. His nephew knew a young rolling 60s rapper buzzing with raw hunger, Nipsey Hussle. Big U stepped in, opening doors with industry connections and pushing Nip forward. The biggest look came when Nip landed a verse on Tupac's posthumous album, Pac's Life, sharing a track with Young Dre and Pac himself. That moment put real heat on Nip's name. Big U stayed involved, backing Nip's early moves, helping roll out Bullets Ain't Got No Names, and supporting the full mixtape series that followed. Nip's profile grew fast, but behind the scenes, tension was building. Word was that Nip wanted out of a deal tied to Big U's label. Big U later said he stopped managing Nip after a tour where police found drugs in one of the vehicles. Someone else took the charge, but after that, the energy shifted. The relationship cooled. Trust cracked. Rumors started swirling. Some people speculated that tours were being used as cover for moving weight across state lines, and that Nip was starting to feel uncomfortable as his career began lifting off. Whether true or not, the vibe between them was done. When Big U later asked for studio equipment back so his son could use it, it reportedly struck a nerve. That friction spilled into the music. Nip aired his frustration on a track called You Don't Got a Clue from the Marathon. No names, but the message was loud. Bars about not being controlled, about never needing anyone to save him, about feeling held back instead of pushed forward. It was clear somebody felt crossed. Big U didn't let it slide. He confronted Nip over the song and challenged him directly. Things escalated fast. Allegedly, others from the set got involved, calling Nip in to be checked. What followed was a physical confrontation that only stopped when Black Sam fired shots into the air, forcing the situation to break apart before it went any further. Police showed up, and whatever was left between them turned into permanent distance. By then, the damage was done. Two powerful figures from the same soil, once moving in the same direction, now divided. A story rooted in ambition, pride, and the unforgiving collision between the streets and success. In the end, time did what tension couldn't. Big U and Nipsey eventually let the public beef die out. No more shots in interviews, no more records aimed sideways. On the surface, the war was over. But peace doesn't always spread evenly. While Nip and Big U cooled off, his brother, Black Sam, never fully let his guard down. The friction lingered there, quiet but real. And from what people close to the situation say, that feeling went both ways. No matter how far Nip's career climbed, the street stayed tied to his ankles. His Rollin' 60s identity was never something he hid, and that loyalty kept putting him in risky spaces. In 2010, a private performance turned into a full-blown sweep when law enforcement caught wind of a so-called hood party tied to Rollin' 60s members. The club got surrounded in the early hours of the morning, and dozens of officers poured in. Arrests followed. The message was clear. Affiliation alone was enough to bring heat. As the years rolled on, Nip kept pushing boundaries that rubbed people the wrong way. One move that reportedly reignited tension was bringing a rival-affiliated rapper, YG, into the 60s area to shoot a video. That decision allegedly sparked physical confrontations, Nip having to stand on his own in a situation where politics mattered more than music. Still, he didn't back down. Later on, he returned the favor, stepping into another hood to shoot a video of his own, signaling that he wasn't going to let street lines box him in creatively. As Nipsey's profile rose, something else shifted too. Big U's stance appeared to soften. The edge dulled. Respect replaced hostility, at least publicly. In 2018, Big U was seen speaking in Nip's honor at a community event tied to developing options, surrounded by major industry names. Nip returned that respect, acknowledging Big U in his own words. On Victory Lap, the success was undeniable. Critical acclaim, industry recognition, and even a shout-out to Big U himself. For a moment, it looked like everything had come full circle. But old dynamics have a way of resurfacing. In early 2019, another situation reportedly stirred things back up. Nip brought DJ Khaled into the 60s neighborhood to shoot a video without checking in first. That move allegedly caused tension, with claims that members were sent to disrupt the shoot, forcing the production to relocate and finish elsewhere. Other reports painted a different picture, saying Nip had already received threats before cameras ever rolled and had shown up prepared with heavy security. There were also whispers that the real issue had less to do with Big U and more to do with younger members, money, and unresolved friction spilling over from nearby neighborhoods. Black Sam later acknowledged that someone had pressed him that day, though he never named names. Whatever the truth was, the energy around Nip had clearly shifted again. The air was heavy. Just days later, tragedy struck. Nipsey Hussle was shot and killed outside his Marathon clothing store, right in the neighborhood he never abandoned, less than a mile from where Big U once walked as a kid. The man arrested was Eric Holder, someone known in the area, allegedly angered after being accused of snitching. One moment turned final in a place Nip believed in enough to invest back into. The streets that shaped him, the loyalty that defined him, and the politics that followed him never let go. What was left behind wasn't just loss. It was unanswered questions, fractured relationships, and a reminder that even success can't always outrun the shadows it comes from. After Nipsey was killed, the silence didn't last long. The streets hate a vacuum, and within days, rumors started moving faster than facts. What began as grief quickly turned into speculation, with people questioning whether what happened was really just a sudden argument with a rank-and-file member. In the corners of the internet and the barbershops alike, darker theories took shape. One of the loudest narratives pulled Big U into the spotlight. People pointed to inconsistencies in stories about where he was that day, replaying interviews and clips, searching for something that didn't line up. Others leaned into the idea of motive, repeating whispers that Nip had refused to re-sign under Big U's label and wanted full control of his own path. Every move Big U made after the murder got magnified, including the fact that he didn't attend Nip's funeral. Then an old IG Live clip resurfaced, where Big U appeared to laugh as a comment reading, "Justice for Nip," floated past the screen. For many, that moment alone was enough to fuel suspicion, but the picture wasn't one-sided. The very next day after Nip's death, Big U posted what looked like a raw tribute, saying the loss hit him hard. He mentioned that the last time he and Nip spoke was just days earlier, at the DJ Khaled video shoot. More posts followed, some emotional, some cryptic, with captions that seemed to hint at a setup and kept circling back to that same video shoot. Less than a week later, Big U announced a peace march in the neighborhood, saying it was meant to honor Nip's legacy and calm the streets. Around the same time, Big U posted footage showing him with DJ Khaled and Fat Joe, celebrating a recorded podcast. He looked upbeat, proud, almost energized, with Khaled returning the love publicly. To supporters, it was proof he was still moving forward, still connected. To critics, it felt tone-deaf, like business as usual while the city mourned. Then things got even louder online. A post appeared on Unique Music's page crediting Big U as the one who introduced Nipsey to the world. The comments exploded. Accusations flooded in, repeating the same claim over and over, that Nip was punished for trying to break free. Big U continued posting Nip's image alongside references to his label, including one unsettling clip where Nip talked about leading, not following. To some, it felt like homage. To others, it felt calculated. Years later, more fuel was added when legal paperwork referenced a monitored conversation where Big U allegedly claimed to be the biggest Rollin' 60 ever, even bigger than Nip. That line alone reopened wounds that never really healed. By then, the theories had already hardened into beliefs for some people. No matter how much time passed, the rumors never fully died. Big U didn't stay silent forever. On multiple platforms, he addressed the talk head-on. In one appearance years later, he said the only reason his name stayed attached to Nip's murder was because of his own fame and his status in the same neighborhood. He insisted they had a solid relationship and said the conspiracy talk was being pushed for clicks, money, and clout. But in the world Nip came from, perception is power, and unanswered questions live long lives. Between loyalty, ego, loss, and legacy, the truth got buried under layers of emotion. And to this day, Nipsey Hussle's death remains more than a crime to many. It's a wound wrapped in suspicion, where every shadow still gets examined twice. Years passed, but the questions never really went quiet. Then in 2024, the noise came back louder than ever. Nipsey's brother, Black Sam, sat down for a podcast and spoke in a way that made people lean in. He didn't spell anything out, but the message landed heavy. What happened to Nip didn't feel like a random blow-up or a lone crash out. His words suggested intention, like somebody had been sent, not triggered. Not long after that, another voice stepped forward. Loose Cannon, once close to Big U and later named as a co-defendant in a federal case, dropped a claim that shook everything. In an interview, he said Big U told him Nip was going to die before it happened. According to him, that information came over the phone, early enough that it pushed him to call Nip directly, just moments before the shooting went down. If true, that meant foreknowledge, not coincidence. When federal paperwork surfaced in 2025, Loose Cannon was no longer just a guy talking. The complaint identified him as a former enforcer tied to Big U, allegedly running robberies and intimidation on his behalf. Prosecutors described the operation like a business, labeling it the Big U enterprise, with Cannon positioned inside it, not on the outside looking in. The complaint itself painted a grim picture. Everything, from the street activity to the money moves, was wrapped into one alleged organization. According to prosecutors, that umbrella covered extortion, robberies, killings, trafficking, financial scams, obstruction, underground gambling, and coordinated fraud. It wasn't described as chaos, it was described as structure. At the center of it all, according to the government, was image. Big U's nonprofit and public identity as a redeemed community figure allegedly allowed him to move freely between worlds, shaking hands in offices by day, pulling strings in the street by night. Developing Options, the same organization promoted as a force for good, was accused of being a front. The complaint claimed it received large sums of city money, millions over time, with significant portions allegedly pulled out as personal income. Prosecutors further alleged that donations meant for community programs, including money raised through celebrity connections, were diverted for personal use. On paper, it looked like outreach. Behind the scenes, they said, it was leverage, a way to control territory quietly while wearing a clean face. Wiretaps included in the case only added fuel. According to investigators, Big U was caught speaking openly about still being exactly who people thought he was. No transformation, no retreat. In one recording, he allegedly claimed nobody could challenge him without dying for it. In another, he reportedly bragged about being the last of his era, still willing to go all the way in modern times. By then, the narrative had shifted. What once lived in rumors and comment sections was now being argued in court filings. Whether it holds up or falls apart is for the system to decide. But in the streets, where memory is long and trust is thin, the story had already changed. For many, Nipsey's death no longer stood alone. It became part of a larger shadow, one shaped by power, control, and the dangerous space where redemption stories and old reputations collide. Behind the scenes, Big U was never portrayed as moving alone. According to allegations, his circle had structure. His supposed right hand was a man known as Sylvester Robinson, called Vay, described as muscle, enforcer, and underboss, all rolled into one. Alongside him was Mark Bearclaw Martin, a trusted lieutenant who'd been around long enough to know how power really moved. Together, that inner circle was said to hold real weight, the kind that didn't need announcements. When their name rang, people listened. For decades, Big U's influence was rumored to stretch deep into Los Angeles nightlife. Clubs, promoters, security, artists, that whole ecosystem. There were places where his presence alone could flip the energy in the room. And when things went left, they went left fast. One night in 2014 became infamous. Outside a Hollywood nightclub, cameras caught a moment that would echo far beyond that curb. Big U tried to enter with a friend who was getting turned away. Words were exchanged. Tempers flared. The friend lashed out at security, and Big U stepped in without hesitation. What followed was ugly, a full-on clash. Samoan security flooded him, overpowering him in front of everyone. When it was over, Big U was bloodied, overwhelmed, and taken away in cuffs. A rare image of someone usually seen as untouchable. But the aftermath is where the story really took on a life of its own. Big U later claimed that what people saw on camera didn't sit right with the city. According to him, the footage sparked outrage across gang lines. Hundreds of people from different sets allegedly poured into Hollywood, not for chaos, but to show solidarity. He said dudes from all over LA felt disrespected by what they'd seen and came ready to stand behind him. Another video surfaced soon after. Big U, face marked up, hands cuffed, surrounded by flashing lights. Around him were well-known figures, rappers like The Game and T.I., his son, and a crowd of Rolling 60s members pressed up against the scene. Tension was thick. At first, many believed the police were responsible for what happened to him, and the standoff reflected that confusion and anger. Even bruised and restrained, the moment reinforced something people already believed. Big U's name still carried weight. Even laid out, the response was immediate. Allies showed up. The streets reacted. The incident didn't shrink his reputation. If anything, it reminded everyone how deep his reach still went. To some, it was proof of loyalty. To others, it was a warning. In a city where nightlife, power, and politics overlap, that night became another chapter in the legend. One that showed how fast one altercation could ripple across Los Angeles when the wrong name was involved. Once the dust settled and the footage kept circulating, the mood shifted fast. People realized it wasn't the police who had put hands on Big U, it was the security. And once that clicked, the energy flipped. The crowd turned their attention straight to the door crew. Words turned into movement. Scuffles broke out. One of the guys who'd been personally involved in jumping Big U didn't stick around to explain himself. He took off running, trying to disappear into the chaos as the mob closed in. From there, the story grew legs. Rumors spread that what happened outside that club didn't stay there. According to Street Talk, lines were drawn between the Rolling 60s, backed by allies from other sets, and the Samoan crews known for controlling nightclub doors across Hollywood. What started as one ugly incident allegedly snowballed into something much bigger, with tension simmering citywide as both sides stood their ground. Eventually, things got hot enough that it had to be addressed directly. Behind closed doors, the Supper Club and Big U reportedly sat down to calm the storm. The word on the street was that the meeting ended with the club cutting a six-figure check, around $200,000, and agreeing to host a food drive tied to Big U's community efforts. Whether damage control or peace offering, the move was seen as a clear attempt to cool everything down. Not long after, the club released a public statement of its own. They framed the incident as the actions of a single rogue security guard who took things too far. According to them, Big U wasn't arrested, wasn't responsible for the violence, and shouldn't have been treated the way he was. The owners distanced themselves from the security team involved that night, saying they'd never work with them again. On paper, it was resolution. But in the streets, the message was already absorbed. The night showed how quickly one moment could tip the balance, how reputations, alliances, and long memories could turn a sidewalk scuffle into a citywide situation. For Big U, it was another reminder that even decades in, his name still moved people and still carried consequences. But according to the allegations, Big U wasn't the type to brush past a public violation and keep it moving. In the street version of the story, disrespect had to be answered, and Hollywood nightlife became one of the main pressure points. Clubs weren't just places to party, they were leverage. And prosecutors say that's where the so-called Big U enterprise leaned in hard. The 2025 criminal complaint lays out one particular scenario that reads like a blueprint. Club owners were allegedly approached with promises that sounded too good to pass up. Big names, packed rooms, instant credibility. The pitch was that artists like T.I. and Wiz Khalifa would pull up and turn the night into an event. In exchange, Big U allegedly wanted a hefty cut, roughly a third of the profits. According to the complaint, the stars never showed. The lights still came on, the bars still ran, but the promise didn't materialize. That's when things allegedly shifted. Instead of apologies, the club was hit with demands. $30,000 up front, plus additional money from the night anyway. The paperwork claims there's a recorded conversation where Big U pressed the owner directly, making it clear this wasn't a negotiation. Investigators say the recording captures threats that went beyond words. Big U allegedly warned that if he didn't get paid, the club would be torn apart. Not metaphorically, literally. He allegedly claimed he could bring thousands of Rolling 60s members down on the venue and shut it down through sheer force. Pay up or deal with the fallout. Whether those threats were ever meant to be carried out or were simply pressure tactics is for the courts to decide. But the accusation fits a larger pattern prosecutors are trying to paint. One where nightlife, fear, celebrity proximity, and street reputation all got woven into the same hustle. In that version of events, clubs weren't just businesses, they were test subjects. And Big U's name wasn't just a name, it was the muscle behind the ask. According to the government's version of events, the reach didn't stop at clubs or street figures. Fame wasn't armor either. Athletes, rappers, entertainers. If you flew into LA with money to make, you were expected to understand the rules. And one of those rules was checking in. The criminal complaint describes checking in as a street tax, a ritual outsiders often get pressured into without fully realizing what they've stepped into. The idea is simple. You touch base with the right people, pay what's asked, and in return, you're promised peace. No robberies, no drama, no sudden problems. Refuse, and you're moving reckless in a city that doesn't forgive that kind of arrogance. Prosecutors say the so-called Big U enterprise claimed that role outright. In their telling, Big U and his circle saw themselves as the gatekeepers, the ones who controlled LA's temperature. Anyone doing business, legal or not, was expected to pay up. It wasn't framed as theft, it was framed as dues. One incident laid out in the complaint reads like a warning shot. A dice game went down involving boxer Adrian Broner, his crew, and a group of NBA players. The game was allegedly fixed, money swinging hands the wrong way. According to prosecutors, the NBA players didn't just take the loss. They reached out and checked in, paying Big U a reported six-figure sum to handle the situation. After that, the complaint claims Big U rounded up his people and confronted Broner directly. The accusation is that Broner and his friends were roughed up, punished for not checking in beforehand, and for allegedly running game on people who had already paid for protection. In that version of events, the violence wasn't random. It was enforcement. A message being sent in real time. True or not, the story fits the broader picture prosecutors are trying to paint. A system where fear replaced contracts, where reputation worked like currency, and where even celebrities had to play by street rules once they landed at LAX. In that world, money didn't just buy luxury, it bought permission. And according to the complaint, Big U wasn't just collecting, he was reminding people who they were dealing with. In a city built on image and influence, the allegation is that power didn't always sit in boardrooms. Sometimes it waited curbside, asking if you checked in yet. By 2020, none of this was really hidden anymore. Online, people weren't asking if Big U was living a double life. They were asking why he even bothered pretending. On one hand, he wore the badge of a reformed figure, a community voice, a man who'd changed. On the other, he was openly talking street politics in public, enforcing rules that everybody in LA already understood. To locals, it wasn't shocking. It was just LA being LA. That contradiction had been an open secret for years. Folks in the city knew Big U moved in two worlds at once, and somehow never tripped. You could scroll social media and see it play out in real time. Clips surfaced of him showing up at film sets planted deep in certain neighborhoods, letting it be known that productions don't just roll cameras wherever they want. The message was clear without being subtle. If you're filming here, you answer to somebody. And if you don't, your shoot isn't leaving with the same equipment it came with. Movie production in the hood wasn't just a phrase, it was a checkpoint. Big U didn't hide from it either. In multiple videos, he positioned himself as the gatekeeper, speaking directly to out-of-towners. Rappers, athletes, film crews, businessmen, anybody touching LA soil with money involved. He warned them straight up. If you come into the city and don't check in, you're moving reckless. And reckless gets punished. No protection, no sympathy, just consequences. What made it hit harder was that he framed it as universal law, not personal greed. He said he played by the same rules. When he traveled, he checked in too. That was the code, as far as he was concerned. Respect the city you're in, or deal with whatever comes with disrespect. In his version of the story, this wasn't extortion, it was structure. To outsiders, it looked wild. To insiders, it was familiar. By then, nobody could really say they didn't know. The speeches, the warnings, the appearances, they were public. Big U wasn't whispering in back rooms. He was talking directly to the camera, daring people to pretend the rules didn't exist. The reformed image and the street enforcement ran side by side, and for a long time, it worked. That's why, when the legal hammer finally came down years later, some people acted surprised, and others just nodded. Because in Los Angeles, the truth had been sitting in plain sight the whole time. It looked like even podcasters weren't off limits. Word on the street was that Big U had the rolling 60s roll up on Gilly and Wallow for $1 million worth of game, stripping them and even taking jewelry valued around $100,000. The story went that Nipsey Hussle, feeling some kind of way about the situation, supposedly returned $20,000 to Gilly. That was a rare moment of mercy in a world where Big U's rules were law. Despite all that, Gilly eventually patched things up with Big U, and the two could later be seen joking around and acting like nothing ever happened. The kind of street diplomacy that kept grudges from turning deadly, at least temporarily. But the truth was, nobody was really safe from the rolling 60s reach. Big U's eye was always on the businesses that operated in the gray areas, the ones without legal protections, unlicensed smoke shops, dispensaries, anything outside the normal system. Allegedly, these were prime targets for extortion. Pay up for protection or get hit. And sometimes, the threat wasn't empty. Stories circulated of shops getting robbed by the 60s, then being forced to return part of the haul as proof of loyalty or capability, essentially turning victims into accomplices. In one particularly notorious incident, footage supposedly leaked online showing a dispensary robbery carried out by the rolling 60s, and the shop just so happened to be owned by Nipsey Hussle and his brother, Black Sam. It was a brutal illustration of how close the lines between street business, personal vendettas, and real violence could get under Big U's watch, and how his influence extended far beyond just reputation. Loose Cannon, born Tremaine Ashley Williams, came up rough in South Central LA. His father was taken from him, serving a death sentence in prison, leaving Tremaine to navigate the streets on his own. He got pulled deep into the politics of gangs and prison life, learning early that loyalty and survival went hand in hand. But he also had a creative side, turning to music as an outlet and a potential escape. He started making beats for people around him, including rising talents like Nipsey Hussle and Draco the Ruler, before stepping into the spotlight himself as a rapper. Loose Cannon even linked up with Nipsey during his early grind, collaborating on tracks that reflected that raw South Central energy. At one point, he was reportedly on the verge of signing with Dr. Dre. Dre even produced his song, Bringing California Back, which featured Nipsey and YG. But in the end, Dre passed, choosing Kendrick Lamar instead, seeing him as the safer bet, someone untangled from street politics, with less potential to bring drama into the studio. Loose Cannon also claimed that he was the mastermind behind the beat for Bringing California Back, saying he crafted the melody on a church piano while locked up. He alleged that his fingerprints were all over projects with huge names: Rihanna, Snoop Dogg, The Game, Nas, 50 Cent, and even said he opened for Drake and 21 Savage on their It's All a Blur tour. But not everyone bought his story. His twin brother, Jermaine Williams, flatly denied most of Loose Cannon's claimed credits, saying that a lot of the connections he flaunted were straight up false. His former partner, Jasmine Gigi Adams, went further, telling Street TV that Loose has a habit of spinning tall tales about himself, calling him a pathological liar. So while Loose Cannon painted a picture of major music industry clout, much of it is heavily disputed by people who actually know him. Loose Cannon eventually drifted into the podcast world, carving out a new lane as a street-adjacent voice, but a loose one at that, when it came to the strict codes that once ruled LA's blocks. Before fully stepping into that media presence, though, he was deep in the streets under Big U's orders, running operations that weren't exactly legal.
The shit is wicked on these mean streets, mean